Humanity once became a storm that burned the galaxy to ash, but from that ruin, they found the strength to rebuild. Through memory, grief, and hope, they forged a new destiny not as conquerors, but as guardians of a fragile future. And even in the endless dark, they chose again and again to reach for the light. Stay with us to discover more incredible journeys. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what lies beyond the next horizon. Nobody remembered how the war started anymore. Maybe it was a mining dispute, a careless insult during a peace summit, or just one unlucky shot fired from the wrong ship at the wrong time. The galaxy had been simmering for years, tensions layered like brittle glass. Humanity had been the newcomers, fresh, curious, a little arrogant, but mostly harmless. Or so everyone thought. At first, it was supposed to be a small conflict. A few burned colonies. A treaty signed under duress. The usual grim dance of politics among older, larger empires. The Kravelan Syndicate, the Trellsan Unity, the Vor Consortium, they laughed when humanity sent its first fleets into battle. Primitive, they called them. Emotional. Reckless. Easy prey. The first battles went as expected. Human ships were torn apart by advanced alien weaponry. Settlements burned. Leaders were paraded on enemy broadcasts as warnings. But humanity did not break. Humanity adapted. Within months, new ships rolled off the dry docks, tougher, uglier, single-minded in their design for survival. New weapons, reverse-engineered from captured tech, tore into enemy fleets like rabid wolves. And something darker grew alongside it. The old rules of war, the codes of honor every other species clung to, meant nothing to humans. No mercy, no surrender. Every battle ended with a simple, brutal message. If you cross us, we will erase you. Alien tongues soon whispered new names for human soldiers: Deathborn, Flesh Reapers, World Breakers. Small squads of humans landed on enemy worlds, leaving nothing behind but ash and broken monuments. They learned alien psychology, twisted it, used it against their enemies. They turned fear itself into a weapon deadlier than any plasma rifle. Humanity didn't want peace. Humanity wanted something worse: revenge. In the ruins of New Saigon, under a sky still bleeding from orbital bombardments, General Elena Merrick stood before the battered remains of Earth's military. Her armor was bloodied and broken. Her voice, when she spoke, was colder than rage. "They thought we were soft," she said. "They thought we would kneel. They were wrong." The campaign that followed was called many things: the Great Purge, the Age of Fire, humanity's reckoning. But to those who lived through it, it was simply terror. Fleet by fleet, world by world, humanity swept through the stars like an unending storm. Their ships bristled with weapons, some so savage they seemed crafted by nightmare itself. Psychological warfare became standard procedure. Orbital bombardments timed to the darkest hours, communications flooded with the screams of the dying, monuments of shattered enemy cities left behind as warnings. The Vor Consortium fell first. They had once dismissed humanity as a minor pest. Memory did not save them. On the red sands of Vor Prime, the survivors crawled from the ruins of their gleaming cities only to be rounded up by human shock troops. No treaties were signed. No mercy was shown. Humanity wasn't just killing bodies. They were erasing histories, cultures, entire civilizations. Across the galaxy, desperate cries for help echoed, but no alliances could form quickly enough. No old grudges could be forgotten fast enough to withstand the human storm. Humanity did not want peace. Humanity did not want rule. Humanity wanted fear. Children cried at night, not for monsters under the bed, but for humans slipping through the cracks in their walls. 3 years into the war, the galaxy became a graveyard. Where once stars twinkled against velvet dark, there were now only fields of wreckage, silent hulks of destroyed ships, charred remains of orbital cities, shattered satellites tumbling endlessly through the void. Captain Marcus Vance of the 17th Infiltration Corps led missions designed not for victory, but for devastation. On Veyron 6, a hidden trails and refugee colony deep in misty forests thought it could hide. They were wrong. Vance's black-armored teams dropped in silence. They corralled civilians into clearings, set fire to the forests, herded survivors toward the flames. No battles were offered, only slaughter. They carved messages into the trees, in human tongues, translated into alien glyphs. "We are your fate." The trails in Unity collapsed not under human guns, but under the weight of its own shame and fear. Soldiers deserted. Mutinies tore fleets apart faster than any human armada ever could. General Merrick watched from the bridge of the Remembrance as the last green worlds flickered and died. Her officers no longer brought her offers of surrender. They knew better. The new human doctrine was simple: no survivors. The Kravelan Syndicate's core worlds fell within a month. The Trellsing Unity sued for peace, offering everything, their libraries, their sacred sites, their very homeworlds. Humanity answered with kinetic strikes from orbit, turning their oceans to steam and their cities to glass. Mercy had died on Earth, with the first colony burned to ash. Mercy had no place in the New Order. The humans did not sing songs of their victories. They did not erect monuments to their dead. They built only more warships. They forged nightmares from iron and blood. In the Outer Rim, an old sage, half-mad from decades of war, warned the last refugees. You think they fight for revenge. You think they fight for conquest. Fools. They fight because pain is all they have left. They are not a species anymore. They are a storm. And the storm was coming. The storm swept on, blind and merciless. Across the broken lanes of space, the remnants of 1,000 civilizations burned. There was no diplomacy, no negotiation. Only the cold certainty that when humanity arrived, there would be no survivors, no forgiveness, no memory left behind. Entire species fled before the advancing fleets. The Threx Dominion tried to surrender by offering their ancient homeworld as tribute. General Merrick responded by ordering a saturation bombardment that shattered the planet's core. The images of Threx Prime's disintegration were broadcast across every frequency the humans could hijack, a reminder, a warning, a promise. For those who remained, life became a desperate race to stay one step ahead of the storm. Refugee fleets jumped from system to system, but humanity was always close behind. Entire planets were stripped bare, not for resources, but for vengeance. It wasn't conquest. It was extinction. In the high councils of the few remaining powers, grim debates raged. Could humanity be reasoned with? Could they be bribed, tricked, or distracted? Could any price be paid to survive? But the truth was evident. Humanity wanted nothing, and that made them unstoppable. Fleet Admiral Juno Lascaris, commanding the 3rd Armored Skyborne, carved a path through the Venzari cluster that would later be known as the Trail of Silent Suns. No battle cries, no calls for surrender, only the silent march of death. When the Venzari finally collapsed under the weight of despair, humanity moved on without even pausing to claim their abandoned cities. There was no need. They had already taken everything that mattered, the future. Among human forces, something darker brewed. With each passing year, the distinction between soldier and executioner blurred. New divisions formed, the Heraborn Brigades, the Black Horizon Wings, units whose entire purpose was to erase not just enemies, but hope itself. They became myths even among human ranks, specters in black armor whose passage was marked by weeping skies and oceans that boiled under stolen stars. Some humans whispered of what they had become. Most did not speak at all. On Earth, what remained of civilian governance crumbled. The homeworld had become a forge of war, oceans poisoned, continents scarred by endless production. Children were born not to live, but to serve the machine of vengeance. There were no more artists, no more poets, only builders of weapons and singers of death. The old dreams of humanity, exploration, unity, enlightenment, had withered under the iron weight of rage. All that remained was a singular purpose. Make the galaxy remember. And remember it did. Legends spread among the last free species. Of human ghost fleets appearing in the shadows of distant suns. Of assassins who moved through dimensions themselves to strike at enemy leaders. Of planets found years later, empty and silent, entire ecosystems surgically removed from existence. The galaxy had become a graveyard. And still, the storm raged on. Even when there was nothing left to destroy, humanity did not stop. They turned on the void itself, hurling superweapon cores into rogue planets, shattering uninhabited systems, boiling nebulas into radioactive wastelands. It was as if existence itself had become their enemy. Captain Marcus Vance led the infamous reclamation expeditions into the dark sectors beyond known space, seeking out anything that dared to exist and extinguishing it. The words burned into the side of his flagship Ash Maker were simple. Nothing but silence. No race, no force, no miracle rose to stop them. Because by then, it wasn't about enemies. It wasn't even about humanity anymore. It was about the echo of pain made manifest across 1,000 worlds, pain so deep, so endless, that it could no longer be separated from those who bore it. And so the storm moved on. Unstoppable, unforgiving, unending. The war ended not with a final battle. It ended because there was nothing left to destroy. Across the galaxy, silence reigned. Planets lay barren, stripped of life and meaning. Star systems were reduced to rubble fields drifting through endless dark. Survivors, if they existed at all, buried themselves so deeply that even human rage could not find them. For the first time in years, human fleets drifted without purpose. Ships once roaring with coordinated assaults now floated like wandering tombs, their crews hollowed out by endless violence. On the bridge of the Remembrance, General Merrick stared out into the void, her reflection fractured against the shattered stars beyond. She had led them here. She had burned the path with fire and blood. And now there was no enemy left to punish, no battle left to win. Only the echo of their own fury, stretching across the dead light years like a whisper of madness. Some humans tried to return to Earth. They found only a ghost. Oceans blackened. Forests turned to chemical wastelands. Cities abandoned to rust and the slow creep of dust. Earth had become a mausoleum for a species that had consumed itself in its own vengeance. Merrick convened what was left of the human command. Once proud admirals, decorated captains, grizzled generals, now little more than scarred husks wearing old titles. What now? Someone asked in the hollow darkness of the council chamber. No one answered. There were no new wars to fight. No new enemies to hate. Only the unbearable question. Who had they become? It was then that the scouts found the world. A signal, faint, almost swallowed by the static sea of cosmic radiation, drifted into the edge of human deep space relays. A planet. Untouched. Alive. A pale blue orb, cradled at the edge of a dying galaxy. It wasn't marked on any chart. No memory spoke of it. An unclaimed hope, dangling in the void like an accusation. Merrick ordered the fleets to move. The Remembrance and 100 other dreadnoughts limped toward the signal, their gravitic drives whining against the broken weave of space-time. When they arrived, they found a paradise. Lush forests, clear oceans, endless skies unmarred by war. It was everything Earth had once been. Everything they had burned away. Landing parties descended. Cautious. Wary. Expecting a trap. Expecting resistance. But there was none. Only silence. And something else. Everywhere they walked, across empty cities of glass and steel, through fields of golden grasses waving in alien winds, they found mirrors. Literal mirrors. Polished surfaces embedded into stones, into trees, into the very walls of the empty cities. And in every mirror, they saw themselves. Not as they were, but as they had become. Eyes hollowed by hatred. Faces twisted by endless grief. Bodies armored not for protection, but to cage the last flickers of their own souls. At the center of the largest city, under a sky that bled unfamiliar constellations, stood a single monument. A slab of unknown metal, inscribed with words that burned into every human mind who read them. We built this world to remember what we lost. We built this world to remember what we became. We built this world to remember that the only true enemy is within. General Merrick fell to her knees before the monument. And for the first time in decades, the iron of rage cracked. Grief, ancient and raw, tore free. Around her, soldiers wept without shame. Fleet captains dropped their banners and tore the insignia from their uniforms. They had won every battle, and they had lost themselves. The humans did not claim the world. They could not. It stood as a judgment, a mirror not to what they had fought, but to what they had allowed themselves to become. The fleet scattered. Some vanished into the black, chasing redemption they would never find. Some stayed in orbit, silent sentinels paying penance. Some returned to the wreckage of Earth, to rebuild not what had been, but what might yet be. But humanity would never again be what it was. They had burned too much, killed too much, forgotten too much. They were no longer conquerors. They were no longer avengers. They were a warning. To themselves. To anyone who dared to believe that rage could ever truly be satisfied. And somewhere, beyond the broken stars, the galaxy whispered, "Beware the ones who lost everything. Beware the ones who learned to survive without hope. Beware the storm that wears a human face." The years that followed the finding of the mirror world were years of silence. The great human fleets, once unstoppable juggernauts, became relics adrift in empty space. Some ships simply shut down, drifting endlessly among the debris fields they had created. Others settled in the ruins of dead civilizations, building shrines from the bones of worlds they had destroyed. But a few, a small, stubborn few, chose something different. They chose to remember. General Merrick, older now, her face lined by more regrets than battles, founded the First Hearth Initiative. Its mission was painfully simple. Find the survivors. Rebuild where possible. Protect without demanding tribute or allegiance. For many, it was too late. Entire species had been wiped from existence, their homeworlds scoured to lifeless dust. But some fragments remained, scattered refugees, forgotten colonies hidden in asteroid belts, broken fleets limping through the dark. At first, they fled at the sight of human ships. They remembered the storm. They remembered the faces of their nightmares. But time, and relentless acts of mercy, began to change the narrative. Merrick personally led missions to bring medicine, to rebuild shattered habitats, to teach rather than to conquer. She never asked for forgiveness. She knew it could not be given. All humanity could offer was a future they had once stolen. On Veland's Reach, the last 10,000 survivors of the Trelson Unity huddled under broken domes, breathing recycled air poisoned by ancient battles. When human envoys landed, the Trelson prepared for annihilation. Instead, they found engineers and doctors, humans who disarmed themselves publicly, who brought seeds and clean water and rebuilt life support systems with shaking hands. The oldest among the Trelson wept openly, because in that moment, the nightmare ended. Not forgotten, but changed. Word spread slowly, like a cautious rumor. Some saw it as a trick. Some refused aid entirely, choosing extinction over the risk of trust. But others, the brave, the desperate, opened their doors. And so humanity, piece by painful piece, began to stitch new life into the corpse of a galaxy it had helped to kill. It was never enough. The scars ran too deep. Entire cultures were lost forever. Entire worlds would never bloom again. But where there had been only silence, voices rose once more. On Kestrel's fall, human settlers and surviving Darvani artisans worked together to regrow the shattered forests, carving songs into the new trees to teach future generations not just what had been lost, but why. On shattered orbital cities above Luther's Eye, Cryon refugees and human welders rebuilt stations into great floating sanctuaries, homes for species who no longer had worlds of their own. Children born there would hear the truth from their earliest breath. Of the fire that once swept the stars. Of the rage that nearly consumed hope. Of the choice their ancestors made to build instead of burn. Humanity became something new. No longer storm. No longer nightmare. Something harder to define. A memory, perhaps. A reminder. A broken, stubborn promise that even those who have fallen into the deepest abyss can climb, bloody and gasping, back into the light. Among the old human fleets, the Remembrance was recommissioned not as a warship, but as a mobile archive. Every world visited, every culture aided, every life saved was recorded in its vaults. Not to erase the past, but to ensure it was never forgotten. In the deepest chamber of the Remembrance, there hung a single relic, a battered, scorched fragment of the Mirror World's monument. Its inscription remained visible even after all the years, even after all the grief. The only true enemy is within. Pilgrims from every surviving species visited the Remembrance, standing in silence before the fragment. Some prayed, some cursed, some wept, but all understood. In the end, it was not strength that saved humanity. It was the willingness to look into the mirror, to face the horror they had become, and to choose, painfully, to be something more. Not heroes. Never heroes. But survivors. Builders. Guardians of a fragile, imperfect hope. And among the slowly healing stars, a new whisper took root. Beware the ones who have lost everything. Because they understand, better than anyone, what is truly worth saving. The galaxy healed slowly, like a wound that would never truly close but could still form new skin over the scars. For the first time in centuries, new ships were built not for war, but for exploration. The Celestial Dawn project was born from the ashes of the old fleets. Its mandate was simple, yet audacious. Venture beyond the shattered remnants of known space. Seek what lay beyond the edge. Carry not banners of conquest, but beacons of memory and peace. General Merrick, her once commanding figure now bowed by age, lived long enough to witness the first launch. The second light, a hybrid of human, Trelzan, Darvani, and Cryon technology, rose from the rebuilt orbital docks of Earth, no longer a planet of ashes but a world of cautious green and quiet waters. Its crew was a tapestry of what the galaxy had become. Human engineers who grew up reading about the wars like ancient myths. Trelzan scholars carrying fragments of lost libraries. Cryon scouts who once had no home but wreckage. Darvani dreamweavers stitching memories into navigation systems. They flew not as conquerors, but as witnesses. As guardians of the fragile future humanity had nearly extinguished. Their mission carried a profound understanding. That survival was not enough. That building a better tomorrow required not forgetting the past, but bearing its weight without surrendering to it. As the second light slipped beyond the old rim of known systems, strange new wonders awaited. Stars that pulsed in impossible rhythms, singing songs in electromagnetic frequencies. Planets where life evolved in crystalline forests and oceans of liquid light. Relics of civilizations so ancient even the Darvani scholars could only theorize about their creators. Each discovery was recorded. Each encounter handled with caution, respect, patience. There were no forced contacts. No demands of allegiance. No assumption that humanity, scarred as it was, deserved anything. They came not as saviors. They came as guests. And beyond the farthest reaches, beyond the forgotten voids where even light trembled, they found something more. Signs of other survivors. Hints of other galaxies, other storms, other species who had endured their own apocalypses and clawed their way back from the edge. An ancient code, broadcast across dimensions and languages so old they blurred into pure thought, repeated endlessly. We remember. We endure. We reach for one another across the dark. Humanity responded with its own signal. Simple. Unadorned. True. We remember. We endure. We reach back. On Earth, on New Haven's reconstructed cities, on Kestrel's fall and Luther's Eye, the people listened as the messages flowed inward. Hope returned. Not in great sweeping anthems, but in small, stubborn moments. A Trelzan child planting a tree on the ruins of a battlefield. A human poet writing verses on the old, cracked walls of the Remembrance. Cryon artisans weaving tapestries from the star maps of lost worlds. Darvani dreamers teaching songs of survival to those born long after the wars ended. And slowly, A new truth emerged across the stars. Humanity was not defined by what it had destroyed. It was defined by what it chose to rebuild. Not alone. Never alone. With every scar carried openly. With every memory held sacred. With every step forward made together. The Celestial Dawn Project expanded. Explorers trained not just in survival, but in healing, ventured into deeper voids. Historians and dreamweavers followed, binding new discoveries into the growing lattice of galactic memory. The mirror world remained sacred, a monument none dared claim or colonize. Its silent cities, its endless reflections, were left untouched as a testament. Pilgrimages were made there from across the stars, to kneel before the great mirrors, to remember what was lost, to promise what would never be lost again. And so, against all odds, against every law of entropy and despair, the galaxy moved forward. Not toward perfection, toward something better, something earned, something fragile, something real. And at the heart of it, still battered, still humbled, still remembering, humanity stood. No longer a storm, no longer a nightmare, but a people who had dared, at the very edge of annihilation, to choose hope instead. Centuries passed. Stars were born and died. The ruins of old wars faded beneath forests, oceans, and cities filled with laughter. The children of the Accord, humans, Trelzan, Cryon, Darvani, and dozens more, grew up under skies not torn by fire, but laced with the quiet hum of rebuilding. Yet through it all, they remembered. In every school, among every people, the mirror world was taught not as myth, but as solemn history. On the anniversary of the ceasefire, not a victory, not a surrender, but the ending of the great silence, bells rang across worlds. Simple notes, carrying across oceans, deserts, nebulae, reminding all who listened that survival had been a choice, that hope had been a rebellion, that memory was sacred. And deep beyond the stars, the second light, now the seventh light, for each generation had built anew, continued its endless voyage. The explorers who manned her were descendants of every bloodline, human, Cryaxian, Darvani, species yet unnamed when the wars raged. They carried the full archive of memory in their cores, a living testament to everything the galaxy had once been, everything it had become. Their mission remained the same. Find the lost. Share without conquering. Listen more than speak. Remember more than judge. One day, beyond the farthest drift, where even cosmic background radiation faded to a whisper, they found another world. It was not paradise. It was not ruin. It was life. Simple, wild, unshaped. A new beginning untouched by ancient wars. The crew of the Seventh Light stood on its surface, breathing air no human had ever breathed, feeling the strange gravity tug at their bones. And there, in a meadow where alien flowers twisted in colors unknown to Earth, they planted a beacon. Not to claim, not to own, but to bear witness. A simple monolith, etched in every language humanity had ever touched, bearing these words. We came from fire. We built from ashes. We choose to remember. And we choose, always, to hope. They left the world untouched, setting new coordinates for the next horizon. Because the mission was endless. Because healing was never finished. Because memory was both a burden and a gift. In the command chamber of the Seventh Light, Captain Lyra Merrick, descendant of Elena Merrick, stared out at the infinite dark, at the unseen worlds beyond. She smiled, a small, stubborn smile, filled with all the defiance and wonder of her ancestors. And she spoke the words that every generation of explorers had sworn since the beginning. We remember. We endure. We reach for one another across the dark. And then the engines flared to life. And the Seventh Light moved forward, not as conquerors, but as a promise, carried by the descendants of a species that had once been a storm, now a beacon, forever,